What is the quadratic formula? The quadratic formula is the formula that can be used to find the solution to a quadratic equation. In order to use the quadratic formula, a quadratic equation must be of this form. We need to have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a cannot be equal to 0. So, we need to have it of this form. Our quadratic equation needs to be set equal to 0. Now let's look at that quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. This is the quadratic formula. When we're trying to solve a quadratic equation, it's always a good idea to start out by seeing if you can factor or graph that quadratic equation. Now sometimes it's difficult to factor or graph a quadratic equation. If you get a quadratic equation where it's not easy to factor or graph, you can use the quadratic formula in order to find the solution to that equation. Now that we know what the quadratic formula is, let's take an example. Let's look at x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Let's use the quadratic formula to find the solution to this quadratic equation. Well, to do that, we first need to see if this quadratic equation is of this form. Well, we have our quadratic equation, and it is set equal to 0. So that means we can go on and use the quadratic formula to find the solution. Now, if your equation is not set equal to 0, you want to move everything to one side of the equal sign in order to make it equal to 0. Now, since our quadratic equation is set equal to 0, we can try to use the quadratic formula. So to do that, we need to identify a, b, and c in this quadratic equation. A is the coefficient in front of x squared. So here we have an invisible 1, which means that a is equal to 1. B is the coefficient in front of x. So here b is 3. And c is the constant that sits at the end. So c is equal to negative 4. Remember to bring the sign of the number with it. Now that we've identified a, b, and c in our quadratic equation, we need to take those values and plug them into our quadratic formula in order to solve. So let's see. We have x equals negative b. Well, our b is 3, so that means we'll have a negative 3. Then we have plus or minus the square root of b squared, which would be 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 4. And that's all divided by 2 times a, so 2 times 1. Now once we've plugged in our values for a, b, and c, all we need to do to get our answer is simplify using the orders of operation. So we have negative 3 plus or minus the square root, and let's simplify everything inside the radical. Let's see, we have 3 squared, which is 9, then minus 4 times 1 times minus 4, which is a plus 16. And that's divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. So now let's keep simplifying. We have negative 3 plus or minus 9 plus 16 is 25, so we have the square root of 25 divided by 2. Now let's take the square root of that 25. Let's see, negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5, and that's still divided by 2. Now look at this expression. We have negative 3 plus or minus 5 all over 2. This plus and minus means that we have the possibility of getting two solutions to our quadratic equation. To figure that out, we need to take both the plus and the minus and split them up into two separate expressions. So let's do that. Let's take the plus version first. So we have x equals negative 3 plus 5 divided by 2. Now let's do the minus. We have x equals negative 3 minus 5 over 2. So now we've taken our expression and split it up, accounting for both the plus and the minus. Now let's simplify both of these. Here we get x equals 2 over 2. Here, x is equal to negative 8 over 2. Simplifying even further, we get that x is equal to 1 and x is equal to negative 4. So we now have our two solutions. X is equal to 1 and x is equal to negative 4. So we took our original quadratic equation and plugged in our values for a, b, and c into the quadratic formula and simplified to find x is equal to 1 and x is equal to -4. But to make sure that this is correct, let's check these answers. To check these answers, we want to take our two values for x and separately plug them back into our original quadratic equation and simplify. We should get a true statement. In other words, when we plug in the values for x, this left-hand side should simplify to 0. So let's see. Let's take x equals 1 first. So we have 1 squared plus 3 times 1 minus 4. Well, if we simplify, we have 1 plus 3 minus 4. That simplifies to 0. So that means that x equals 1 is one of our solutions. Now let's check x equals -4. Again, plug that into our original expression. -4 squared plus 3 times -4 minus 4. Simplifying, we want to square -4, so -4 times -4 is a positive 16. Then we have -12 minus 4. That simplifies to 0 as well. So that means that both x equals 1 and x equals -4 are solutions to our original equation. So remember, the quadratic formula can be used to find the solution to a quadratic equation. The quadratic formula is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And in order to use that quadratic formula, your quadratic equation must be of this form, and it must be set equal to 0.